Sabbath is a practice from the way of Jesus by which we war against the restlessness of our age and instead take on the easy yoke of Jesus, our Rabbi, and find rest for our souls. As we said in the previous session, there are 4 movements to the Sabbath: stop, rest, delight, and worship. On the docket for this week is rest. If you have your Bible, one more time, turn to Genesis chapter 2 and read with me from verse 2. By the 7th day, God had finished the work he had been doing, so on the 7th day he rested, or he Sabbathed from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Now, when I hear the word rest, I think of sleep, or maybe a little margin, or a day off, or just a few hours to relax. But the idea behind this verb Shabbat in Hebrew is far more. It's holistic rest, or what Jesus called rest for your souls, for your whole person. On the Sabbath, we rest from work, all work, not just paid work, not just our jobs, but all work, including our chores and our errands and our to-do lists. We rest from working. But it's actually more than that. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, in his magisterial book, The Sabbath, says we rest not just from work, but from even thinking about work. Neuroscientists tell us that when we think about work, even if we are at home on the couch, it secretes the same stress chemicals in our brain as if we were at the office or on the job site or in the actual situation. We rest from even the thought of working, but it's still more. We rest from wanting and worrying. We get off the wheel of suffering. I want this, I don't want that. We delight in God and we come to rest. To unpack this idea, let me kind of Bible nerd out on you for just a few more minutes. Turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 5. You may or may not know the 10 Commandments are recorded twice in the Torah, the Hebrew word for the books of Moses. The first is in Exodus chapter 20, where Israel is at the foot of Mount Sinai right after leaving Egypt. The second is in Deuteronomy 5 on the edge of the Jordan River, right before Israel is entering the Promised Land. There are 40 years in between, which means Deuteronomy 5 is to the next generation who were not there, who were unborn or still babies at Mount Sinai. And the Sabbath command is similar, but it's a little bit different. Read with me from Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 12. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your ox, your donkey, or any of your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns, so that your male and female servants may rest as you do. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. Now, there are 2 differences between the Sabbath command in Exodus 20 and in Deuteronomy 5. The first is minor. In Exodus, it's remember the Sabbath, but here in Deuteronomy, it's observe the Sabbath. Remember and observe. The Hebrew word is shamar, and it means to keep watch over or to guard like a sentry. Think of how we observe a holiday or a holy day, such as Christmas or Easter. We guard it, we kind of watch over it to make it special and unique. That's the idea. Sabbath is like a weekly holiday. We are to keep watch over it lest it become just another ordinary day on the weekend. This is why in the Kiddush, which is the ancient Jewish liturgy that you begin the Sabbath with, you light not 1 but 2 candles to symbolize the 2 commands, remember and observe. That's change number 1. The rest of the command is verbatim until the end, where there is a major change. In Exodus, it's, "For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore he blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy." But in Deuteronomy, it's, "Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, but the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm." Same command, but a whole different rationale behind the command. In Exodus, the rationale is grounded in the story of creation, "For in 6 days God created the heavens and the earth." Here in Deuteronomy, it's grounded in the story of liberation. You were, past tense, slaves in Egypt, but you're not slaves anymore. At Sinai, Sabbath is about the rhythm. In Deuteronomy, it's about the resistance. The last session was all about rhythm. This session is all about resistance. Give me a few more minutes to lay it out. In the Exodus story, there's all sorts of language about restlessness. For example, here's a few quotes from Exodus chapter 5. "Why are you taking the people away from their labor? Get back to your work. Make the work harder so they keep working." Pharaoh said, "Lazy, that's what you are, lazy. That's why you keep saying, 'Let us go and sacrifice to the Lord.' Now get to work. You will not be given any straw, yet you must produce your full quota of bricks." In the story, Pharaoh is a cruel tyrant. No matter how hard the Hebrews work, it was never enough. They lived under the oppressive yoke of the daily quota, more, more, more. And it wasn't just Pharaoh, it was the socioeconomic system of Egypt as a whole. Israel was making bricks to build, quote, "supply cities," end quote, entire cities just to store all of Pharaoh's extra stuff. And it was an economic system built on the back of slavery. To get to the lavish, opulent lifestyle of a Pharaoh or an Egypt, you need cheap labor to work while you rest. And slaves don't get a Sabbath, a day of rest. Slaves in an empire like that are subhuman, a commodity to buy and sell. They only have value in what they produce. They work all day, every day until they die. Rest in the story is a byproduct of the salvation and deliverance of God. So, the command is to remember you're not a slave anymore. You're in a new kingdom, under a new king. You're not in Egypt. There's no daily quota, no taskmaster over your head. And this is key. Remember, Deuteronomy 5 was to the next generation. Remember to never become a slave driver yourself. Hence the command about your male and female servants, the foreigner, even your animals. All are equal under the Sabbath. All rest on the seventh day. The theologian A.J. Swoboda calls the Sabbath scheduled social justice. And we need this practice now more than ever before because Pharaoh and Egypt are both alive and well. In the literary design of the Bible, Egypt is an archetype, similar to Babylon later on. It was a real historic nation state, an empire, but it's symbolic of all empires down through time and all across the world. And while we are not ancient Hebrews living in Egypt, you're a Kiwi living in Auckland or a Canadian living in Vancouver or an American living in Portland, Oregon, still, we live in a modern day Egypt, in a culture of restlessness, a culture of unchecked desire for more. In the West, we work more than ever before. The Japanese have a word, karoshi, that literally means death by overwork. But we Americans work 137 more hours per year than the Japanese, 260 more hours per year than you Brits, and 499 more hours per year on average than the French. God bless you, French. In my home country of the US, we work more than any other nation in the world. Now, as a general rule, this is more true of older generations than younger. In fact, to be honest, many young adults have the opposite problem. For them, it's often not too much work, but too much play. But as a culture, we work or play more than ever before. And we have more than ever before. Conservative estimates say we now spend 2 to 3 times more on goods and services than our ancestors did in 1945. Our homes are 3 times larger and full of twice as many things. The average home in my country, not rich, average, has over 300,000 items in it. Here in the US, we don't have supply cities, but there are 2.3 billion square feet of self-storage space, something like 7.3 square feet for every person in our nation. Meanwhile, many people all around us, hiding in plain sight, possibly some around you right now, are barely able to make rent and put food on the table. But in spite of that, we're unhappier than ever before. Sociologists tell us that the happiness levels in the West hit a peak in the 1950s and have been in a steady decline ever since. Interesting, that's right around when the blue laws in my country and other countries were phased out and the Lord's Day, or the Sabbath, was secularized into the weekend. To sum up, we work more than ever before, we have more than ever before, and we're still not happy. It's Egypt all over again. And it's so easy to just get sucked into the culture, to feel like you just have to work those extra hours to get ahead, like you have to reach a certain standard of living, you have to own this or that, you have to participate in this or that. It's so easy just to say, well, that's just how it is. But it doesn't have to be this way. Listen carefully. Rest is an act of resistance. It is an act of defiance against Pharaoh and his empire. It is a way of saying with your whole life, enough. Enough work. Work is a good thing, but it's not the thing. Enough stuff. Stuff isn't bad, but most of us have more than enough. Sabbath rest is a way to break our addiction to the twin gods in the West, accomplishment and accumulation. Later in the Old Testament, there are Sabbath commands against buying or selling, against all commerce on the Sabbath. That's where blue laws came from. In our family, we've chosen to follow this ancient wisdom. On the Sabbath, we don't shop or do anything that would make us want more, like read a magazine or dink around online. We don't even talk about what we want more of. We just be and practice gratitude for what we have, and we enjoy the goodness of God in our actual life. This can be hard to do. We have 3 teenagers right now that I'm raising, and I watch our culture attempt to monetize their restlessness just like it does to me, constantly. But every week, the Sabbath is our line in the sand as a family, enough. My point is, accomplishment and accumulation aren't evil. They can even be good, to a limit. At some point, you need a line in the sand to say, this far you shall go and no farther. I do not need to work more hours. I do not need to make more money or move up in the company. I do not need a new car. I do not need the perfect grade or the perfect body or the perfect yard or the perfect whatever. I do not need to earn my human father's approval. I already have it from my heavenly Father. Sabbath is a weekly reminder. You're not a slave anymore. Pharaoh and his army are at the bottom of the Red Sea. You are free. You have all you need to thrive with God in his world. You are in a new kingdom now with a new king. You are loved just as you are with all of your humanity. You don't have to produce or perform or purchase your way into love. You don't need more things or more experiences or more relationships because you have God. You don't need to hold your life together in fear for your future because God is your good shepherd. Of course, this all sounds beautiful, but my point is, Sabbath rest is an act of resistance. It is a declaration of war on all that is anti-Sabbath and anti the Lord of the Sabbath, which means when you practice Sabbath, you are going to feel resistance, both external resistance. The culture all around you is a Sabbathless, rhythmless, hollow out your soul and suck you dry culture. To Sabbath well will require intentionality, preparation, and a resolute determination to go against the flow of the cultural tide, to live differently. But Sabbath rest is your secret weapon in the war against the powers and the principalities of our age. It's an entire day where you say, I have enough, and I am enough. In those push-pull moments, when you have to resist both external forces and internal forces that are anti-Sabbath, remember, You're not a slave anymore. You're free. God is king, but he's nothing like Pharaoh. He is a Sabbath-keeping, Sabbath-commanding God. Jesus called himself the Lord of the Sabbath, and he's offering you rest for your souls. The question is, will you take that rest and will you resist?